"You there, the cleaning lady in the back. Come up here, now." Victor Chase's voice sliced through the Staples Center like a judge delivering a sentence. 10,000 fans turned their heads in perfect unison. On the live stream, 5 million people were locked onto this exact moment. Betty Williams, 28 years old, stood frozen mid-step. Her hands were still in yellow rubber gloves. She had just emptied the trash bin backstage exactly 3 minutes earlier. The thing that made her look most out of place at that moment wasn't just the blue janitor's uniform. It was the quiet dignity in her posture that seemed to irritate something deep in Victor. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." Victor cut her off before she could finish the sentence. He strode forward with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no, grabbed Betty by the arm, and pulled her straight into the center of the stage lights, as if placing an object on display for the crowd's judgment. "Let everyone see," he said, his voice dripping with false generosity, "whether you can actually sing or whether you're just good at scrubbing floors." Then Victor turned to his band and snapped his fingers sharply, the way one would summon a waiter. "Play Rise Up for her," he smiled, a smile with edges. "The gospel run, the same run that's made me $50 million. And just as the band was about to come in, Victor leaned in close to Betty. He switched off his own microphone, but Betty's mic was still live. His voice dropped to a whisper that the entire arena and all 5 million viewers heard with perfect clarity. "Fail quietly, sweetheart." The air froze. The entire arena held its breath, as if waiting for something to shatter. Betty stood there under lights blazing like interrogation lamps, with thousands of eyes in front of her and a world behind her passing judgment through screens. But what she was about to do next wouldn't just prove Victor Chase wrong. It would expose everything he had built on theft and lies. If you enjoy stories where truth confronts power, remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss the videos we release every week. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments section. Please subscribe to Beyond Hope and Belief, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Because what comes next is where things truly begin to unravel. And the question is, why was Victor so determined to drag a janitor onto the stage to humiliate her in front of millions? What was he afraid of? Afraid enough to do that? But to understand why this moment matters so much, we need to rewind time to 7 years earlier. Because Betty Williams was not always a woman who cleaned floors. 7 years ago, she had been one of the most electrifying contestants on America's Voice, the hit talent competition that promised to launch stars. Betty possessed a rare vocal gift, a voice with a range spanning from E3 to E6, but what caught the professionals' attention was not just the technical range. It was her ability to channel gospel tradition through every note, to make a song feel like testimony, to shift from whispered vulnerability to soaring power so seamlessly that listeners couldn't detect where technique ended and soul began. The judges called her the voice of her generation. But America had other ideas about who deserved to be a star. And what happened to Betty after that finale would reveal a pattern of exploitation that Victor Chase had built his entire empire on. A pattern that required black voices to remain invisible so that white mediocrity could shine. 7 years ago, Betty Williams walked onto the stage of America's Voice with nothing but a dream and a voice that could shatter glass. At 21, when she sang, "I Will Always Love You," all 4 judges turned their chairs. Simon Hartley called her the voice of her generation. She became the frontrunner, the first black woman to reach the finals in 5 years. Then the backlash began. Tweets flooded in like a dark tide, too urban, not relatable. Anonymous blogs claimed she was aggressive, playing the victim card. Producers pressured her to tone down the runs, make her sound more accessible. Her vocal coach said, "Voice careful as someone defusing a bomb. You're scaring the suburban moms. Can you smile more, be less intense?" Finale night, Betty delivered a flawless performance. She lost to a white country singer with half her ability. 3 major labels offered development deals requiring her to change everything: her image, her sound, her name. One A&R rep said it plainly: "You're incredibly talented, Betty, but America isn't ready for, well, you know." Betty refused to compromise. Every label withdrew. 7 years later, she works night shift at the Staples Center, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., $16.50 an hour. Her mother died 2 years ago from breast cancer, leaving Betty guardian to her brother Marcus, a junior at Howard University. Marcus needs $35,000 for his final year. Betty has saved $12,000. She works 2 jobs, janitor at night, server by day. She sleeps 4 hours if she's lucky. The one thing she never gave up: singing while she cleans. Gospel songs her mother taught her, runs that could shatter glass, a voice that makes other janitors stop and cry. Her coworker James always says, "Betty, you got a gift from God. Why you hiding it behind a mop?" Betty's answer never changes. Because gifts don't pay tuition, James. And nobody wants to hear a black girl who doesn't know her place. 4 hours before the concert, Victor Chase arrived at the Staples Center like royalty entering a kingdom. The Voice of Hope charity concert. Tickets $750 each, 10,000 sold, $7.5 million raised allegedly for urban youth music programs. Betty was assigned to clean the backstage area during rehearsal, to stay invisible, to do her job. She heard him before she saw him. Victor's voice echoed through the backstage corridor, practicing "Rise Up," the gospel-influenced anthem that had made him $50 million. Betty paused outside the rehearsal room door, listening. His voice was technically competent but hollow, the runs mechanical, empty of the soul that made gospel music what it was. Then another voice entered, a black woman, mid-40s, carrying herself with quiet dignity. "Let's work on the melisma in the bridge," she said. Through a crack in the door, Betty watched as Simone Hayes demonstrated the gospel run that made "Rise Up" powerful. The phrase flowed from Simone's mouth like water, like prayer, rooted in black church tradition passed down through generations. Victor attempted it, failed, tried again, still flat, still empty. "You have to feel it, Victor," Simone said gently. "It comes from suffering, from faith, from a community that sang through pain." Victor's jaw tightened. "Just show me the technical execution, Simone. I don't need a history lesson." After 30 minutes, Victor approximated the run well enough to fool casual listeners. But Betty knew any gospel choir member would hear the counterfeit immediately. Then came the moment that made Betty's blood run cold. "Will I be credited on this album?" Simone asked quietly. Victor's manager interrupted before he could answer. "Simone, we've discussed this. You're a consultant. Consultants don't get songwriting credits." Simone's face fell. She'd heard this before. Victor handed her a check for $2,000, said "Pleasure working with you," and dismissed her like a servant. Betty's hands shook as she pulled out her phone during break. A quick search revealed 3 other black vocal coaches who'd worked with Victor, all uncredited, all paid minimal fees, all bound by NDAs. One anonymous quote appeared in a music blog. "He took our sound, our culture, our history, and made millions. We got enough to pay rent for 2 months." Betty dug deeper. Of the $7.5 million raised tonight, only 8%, $600,000, would actually reach the youth programs. The rest was administrative costs, which meant Victor's brand building, his publicity machine, his empire built on stolen black excellence. On the backstage monitor, promotional footage played. Images of black and brown children in music programs, a young black girl holding a microphone with hope shining in her eyes. Betty saw herself at that age, heard her mother's voice. "Your voice is a gift from God, baby." She thought of Marcus counting on her, of Simone walking away with $2,000 for 15 years of expertise, of that little girl who might never get her chance because men like Victor took everything and gave back nothing. Betty whispered to the empty hallway, "Not tonight, not anymore." 8 p.m. The Staples Center blazed with light and sound, 10,000 fans packed into seats that cost more than Betty made in a month. The livestream counter showed 5 million viewers. Victor Chase performed his first 3 songs, polished, professional, utterly generic. Betty emptied trash near the wings, trying to remain invisible. Between songs, Victor spotted her. Something about Betty's presence triggered something in him. Maybe the way she moved instinctively to the music. Maybe the quiet confidence in her posture despite the uniform. Maybe he sensed the threat of a black woman who didn't need his permission to embody what he had to pay others to teach him. His manager leaned in, whispering. Victor's face lit up with an idea that Betty would later recognize as cruelty disguised as charity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced, "we have someone special backstage." He pointed directly at Betty. "You there, the cleaning lady, what's your name?" Betty froze. Every cell in her body screamed, "Run." "Betty," she managed, voice barely audible. "Betty, everyone, Betty keeps this place spotless for us. Come up here, Betty, let's give her a moment." The applause was patronizing, condescending, the kind rich people gave when they wanted to feel generous without actually giving anything. Betty walked onto the stage, yellow gloves still on, mop bucket visible in the wings. The contrast was deliberate. Victor in designer clothes and diamonds, Betty in a work uniform. "Betty, do you sing?" Victor asked, performing kindness for the cameras. "I used to." "Used to? Why'd you stop?" His smile had edges. "Because I was told I wasn't marketable." The arena went quiet. Victor's smile faltered for half a second before recovering. "Well, let's see, sing something for us. Show everyone what you've got." His tone dripped with mockery wrapped in fake encouragement. He expected her to fail, to prove that cleaning was where she belonged. Betty's survival instincts screamed at her to decline, to protect Marcus, to stay invisible. But she saw herself on the big screen, a black woman in a janitor's uniform standing on the same stage where she was once meant to shine as a star. She heard her mother's voice. "Don't ever let them make you small." Betty removed the yellow gloves slowly, deliberately, and dropped them on the stage floor. "What would you like me to sing?" Victor smirked. "How about Rise Up, since you know it so well?" The band started. Victor stepped back, arms crossed, expecting a train wreck. And just as the music began, he leaned close to Betty, switching off his own microphone while hers remained live. His whisper carried through the entire arena and to 5 million viewers. "Fail quietly, sweetheart." The air froze. 10,000 people held their breath. Betty stood under lights blazing like judgment, with the world watching through screens. What she did next would change everything. Betty closed her eyes and took a breath, not the shallow breath of fear, but the deep, grounded breath of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She began to sing. The first verse emerged gentle, controlled, but underneath ran a current of something deeper, a resonance that made 10,000 people unconsciously lean forward in their seats. This wasn't just technique. This was testimony. Every note carried the weight of 7 years cleaning floors, of watching less talented people succeed, of being told she was simultaneously too much and not enough. The pre-chorus arrived and Betty's voice opened up, not loud but full, filling the arena like sunlight breaking through clouds. People in the front rows gasped. Several put their hands over their mouths. On stage, Victor's confident smirk began to crack. Then came the gospel run. Betty reached the phrase where Victor's stolen technique lived, and she didn't just execute it, she inhabited it. The melisma flowed like water, like prayer, like a grandmother's hands blessing a child's head. This was a run rooted in the black church, in field hollers, in survival songs, in a lineage Victor could never access because he'd never had to sing his way through suffering. Betty held a note, clear, powerful, effortless, then flipped into a whistle register so pure it sounded like crystal singing. The arena exploded. 10,000 people surged to their feet, screaming, crying, some with their hands raised like they were in church. 3 Black Grammy winners in the VIP section stood with tears streaming down their faces. The livestream chat scrolled so fast it became unreadable. Who is she? Oh my God, Victor could never. Betty finished the song. The final note rang in perfect silence before the arena erupted again, louder than before, a roar of recognition and vindication. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Victor. His face had gone pale. She spoke quietly into the microphone, but every person in that arena heard her clearly. That's how it's supposed to sound, when it's real. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause came again, thunderous, relentless. Victor stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed image begin to crumble in real time. Betty had just done more than sing a song. She had exposed a truth that couldn't be taken back. And somewhere in the livestream comments, someone typed 4 words that would define everything that came next. Victor Chase is fake. Within 30 seconds, #BettyWilliams was trending globally. Within 2 minutes, Victor Chase exposed hit number 1. The clip of her performance reached 1 million views in 5 minutes. The reckoning had begun. Victor recovered quickly. He was, after all, a professional at performance, on stage and off. "Wow, Betty, that was something," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "You know, it's easy to have one good moment. The hard part is sustaining a career. Discipline, professionalism, showing up." The subtle dig landed perfectly, implying Betty lacked all those qualities. He turned to the audience. "Let's give Betty a hand as she gets back to work. We all have our roles to play, right?" The words "back to work" and "roles to play" hit like a slap, reminding Betty and everyone watching exactly where the industry had decided she belonged. But the internet had already made its decision. The comments were brutal, immediate, and divided. Backstage, Betty shook violently as adrenaline crashed through her system. James hugged her tight. "Baby girl, you just changed your life." But Betty's phone was already exploding with notifications, and not all of them were positive. Racist comments flooded in, affirmative action at its finest. "She's just angry," playing the race card for attention. Within an hour, Victor's PR team released a statement. Victor was thrilled to give a hardworking employee a special moment. "We celebrate all voices." Within 2 hours, Staples Center management called. "We need to discuss your actions tonight. You are not authorized to perform." Within 3 hours, Victor's lawyer arrived backstage with a document. Preston Cole was everything Betty expected. Expensive suit, cold eyes, the kind of man who weaponized law for the wealthy. The cease and desist letter claimed Betty had staged an ambush to defame Victor Chase's reputation and profit from viral attention. The offer was simple: $200,000 and a gag order NDA. Betty would issue a public apology stating she'd been given a generous opportunity and that her comments about Victor were misconstrued. The threat was simpler: refuse and face a $15 million defamation lawsuit. "We will make your life hell," Preston said, not even trying to hide the malice. "You'll lose your job, your brother will lose his tuition, and you'll be painted as an ungrateful opportunist who attacked a man who tried to help her." Betty looked at the paper, then at Preston. "He didn't try to help me. He tried to humiliate me, and I'm not apologizing for having a voice." Preston's smile was ice. "Then we'll destroy you. And trust me, Betty, a black woman accusing a beloved white pop star of racism, America will eat you alive." He left the papers on the table and walked out. Betty stared at them, her hands trembling. Outside, she could hear the concert continuing, Victor's voice amplified through speakers, performing for thousands while her world collapsed in a backstage room that smelled of bleach and broken dreams. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Sis, what's happening? People are saying crazy things. Are you okay?" Betty didn't know how to answer. She just sung the truth in front of 5 million people. And now, the machine designed to protect men like Victor was coming for her with everything it had. Betty woke at 6 a.m. to 10,000 notifications. The narrative had shifted overnight like a riptide pulling her under. Coordinated articles appeared across entertainment sites. Janitor's viral moment, opportunism or genuine talent. Sources close to Victor say Betty Williams has a history of seeking attention and making false accusations. The dog whistles were everywhere, urban, threatening, entitled, playing victim. By noon, someone had leaked photos of Betty's apartment. Comments beneath them read, "Living in poverty and blaming successful white men instead of taking responsibility." Fake stories emerged claiming Betty had been fired from previous jobs for aggressive behavior. A doctored video surfaced showing what appeared to be Betty arguing with a supervisor, portrayed as proof she was difficult. The $15 million lawsuit was filed officially, nomming Betty and any media outlets perpetuating false narratives about Mr. Chase's artistry. The strategy was clear: bankrupt her through litigation, force settlement, silence her permanently. Then came the professional consequences. Staples Center fired her for unauthorized conduct during a private event. The Soul Food restaurant suspended her pending investigation into her character. Both income sources gone overnight. Marcus called from Howard, his voice breaking. Students were harassing him, calling his sister a race baiter and worse. Someone spray-painted the N-word on Betty's apartment door. Anonymous death threats arrived. "You don't know your place. We'll teach you." The breaking point came 3 days later. Marcus called again, terrified. 2 men in a car had followed him home from class. They didn't touch him, just followed slowly, making sure he saw them. The message was clear. "Maybe you should just sign the paper," Marcus said through tears. "It's not worth this." At 2 a.m., Betty sat alone on her floor, the NDA document in front of her. $200,000 would cover Marcus's tuition completely, pay rent for 2 years, rebuild their lives. All she had to do was lie. Say Victor was kind and generous. Admit she misunderstood. All she had to do was become invisible again. Her phone sat silent beside her. Her mother's photo stared from the screen. Betty remembered her final words in the hospital. "Don't let them make you small, baby. You hear me? Don't ever let them make you small." Betty picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Betty," a woman's voice shaking. "This is Simone Hayes, the vocal coach." Betty's breath caught. "I saw what you did," Simone continued. "I saw what he's doing to you, and I'm done being afraid." Her voice strengthened. "I have recordings, Betty, every session, emails, contracts, proof that Victor has been stealing from black artists for over a decade." Betty closed her eyes, tears finally breaking free. "Why now?" she whispered. "Because you did what I was too scared to do," Simone said. "You didn't let him make you small." Betty looked at the NDA, then at her mother's photo. She put down the pen and picked up her phone. "Tell me everything." Within 24 hours of Simone's call, 3 other black vocal coaches came forward publicly, breaking their NDAs. A black songwriter revealed that Victor's team had purchased his gospel-influenced melody for $5,000, then credited it as Victor Chase original composition. The song had made $40 million. A hairstylist shared how Victor had appropriated black hairstyles and aesthetics to build his brand on blackness, while donating to politicians who opposed racial justice legislation. The avalanche had begun. Taylor Monroe, a legendary black R&B singer with 40 years in the industry, tweeted, "I've been watching this industry erase us for 3 decades. Betty Williams is the truth they're afraid of. I stand with her." Within hours, Alicia Keys, John Legend, HER, and Lizzo all signaled support. A GoFundMe appeared, legal defense for Betty Williams. It raised $500,000 in 8 hours. Then Jasmine Chen called, a civil rights lawyer known for dismantling exploitative contracts. She offered pro bono representation. "Betty, this isn't just about you anymore," she said, her voice fierce with purpose. "This is about every black artist who's been erased. We're going to win." Her strategy was elegant: flip the lawsuit, countersue for cultural appropriation, stolen intellectual property, workplace discrimination, and racial harassment. But more than that, expose the pattern. Investigative journalists started digging. Victor's charity had given less than 10% to actual programs over 10 years. The pattern became undeniable. Victor targeted black talent, extracted their gifts, paid them minimally, blocked their careers while profiting from their culture. He was a system unto himself, a perfect embodiment of centuries of theft dressed in designer clothes. Betty made her decision. She would not sign the NDA. At a press conference organized by Jasmine, Betty spoke publicly for the first time since the performance. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Betty stood at the microphone, wearing the same blue work shirt she'd worn on stage, a deliberate choice. "I'm not angry," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm tired. I'm tired of being told my voice doesn't matter. I'm tired of watching mediocrity rewarded while excellence is punished, as long as that excellence is black. I'm tired of a system that steals from us, then calls us thieves when we ask for what's ours." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "Victor Chase didn't give me an opportunity. He tried to remind me of my place. Well, I'm here to say, I don't have a place. I have a voice, and I'm not apologizing for using it." The room exploded with questions, but Betty was already walking away. Behind her, Jasmine Chen smiled. Simone Hayes stood in the back of the room with tears streaming down her face. And across social media, a new hashtag emerged: Amplify Silence Voices. The tide had turned. Victor Chase's empire, built on stolen black excellence, was about to face a reckoning it couldn't buy its way out of. Because Betty Williams had done something dangerous. She told the truth. And the truth, once spoken, couldn't be silenced by lawsuits or money or threats. It could only be amplified. 3 weeks later, federal court, Los Angeles. The preliminary hearing on Victor's motion to stop Betty from making defamatory statements drew 50 reporters and a line of supporters that wrapped around the block. Victor arrived with 6 attorneys in expensive suits, confident smirks plastered on their faces like armor. Betty arrived with Jasmine Chen and a single accordion file stuffed with evidence. Preston Cole opened with the expected argument. "Ms. Williams is a disgruntled former employee engaging in a coordinated smear campaign to extort money from my client." Jasmine stood, files in hand. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has a 15-year pattern of cultural exploitation. We have contracts, recordings, and testimony from 12 black artists who were systematically erased from Mr. Chase's work." The evidence rolled out like an avalanche. Video comparison. Simone teaching Victor the gospel run versus Victor performing it. Identical phrasing, but Victor credited as sole creator. Emails from Victor's team explicitly instructing, "Make sure the black consultants sign NDAs. We don't want credit disputes." Financial records showing Victor's charity had claimed $75 million raised over 10 years, but only $6 million reached actual programs. Then Simone took the stand, trembling but resolute. "He took my grandmother's song, a spiritual we sang in our church, and he trademarked it. My family can't even sing it publicly without risking legal action." The judge, Honorable Diane Reeves, a black woman in her 60s who'd seen this pattern too many times, leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, does your client deny hearing black vocal coaches?" "Hearing consultants is standard practice." Does he deny that these consultants were not credited? Credit arrangements are contractual. Does he deny profiting from techniques and cultural expressions originated by black artists while simultaneously blocking those same artists from industry access? Preston's voice rose. Your Honor, this is inflammatory. It's a yes or no question, counselor. Silence filled the courtroom like water filling lungs. I'll take that as confirmation. Judge Reeves turned to Victor directly. Mr. Chase, I'm going to ask you to do something. Perform the gospel run from Rise Up right now, a cappella, no coaching, no preparation, the way Betty Williams did. Victor's face drained of color. Your Honor, I don't see how this is relevant. You're suing Ms. Williams for claiming you cannot perform what you claim to have created, so perform it. My vocal cords haven't been warmed up properly. Ms. Williams performed it spontaneously with no warm-up after a full shift of manual labor. Surely you can manage. Victor attempted it. The sound that emerged was flat, mechanical, soulless. Nothing like the recording that had made him $50 million. Nothing like what Betty had delivered effortlessly on that stage. Thank you, Judge Reeves said. That will be sufficient. Her ruling came swift and sharp. Motion for injunction is denied. Furthermore, I am sanctioning the plaintiff for filing a lawsuit intended to silence truthful speech and weaponize the legal system against a marginalized individual. She looked at Betty. Ms. Williams, you are free to continue telling your story. This court recognizes that what happened to you is part of a systemic pattern of cultural appropriation and racial exploitation in the entertainment industry. The gavel came down. Outside, Betty faced 50 cameras and spoke 8 words. This was never about me versus Victor. This is about a system that has been stealing from black people for centuries and calling it collaboration. Today, that system blinked. Within 48 hours, Victor's sponsors terminated their contracts. His label dropped him. His tour was canceled, $90 million in losses. 2 Grammy nominations were rescinded. A federal investigation opened into his charity's finances. The empire built on theft was crumbling, and Betty Williams, the woman they tried to keep invisible, stood in the light at last. The first call came from John Legend himself. We want to cover Marcus's tuition, all 4 years plus graduate school if he wants. The second came from Alicia Keys. I'm starting a label for artists the industry has silenced. You're the first signing. Full creative control. You own your masters. The GoFundMe reached $2.3 million. Betty established the Invisible Voices Foundation, offering scholarships for black artists from working-class backgrounds, artists who'd been told they weren't marketable, that America wasn't ready for them. 3 months later, Betty recorded her first album, Invisible No More, at a black-owned studio in Atlanta. Simone Hayes co-produced. The other silenced vocal coaches sang background and co-wrote. Marcus contributed a spoken word piece about watching his sister's courage. The lead single, My Mother's Daughter, became a gospel R&B anthem about reclaiming stolen heritage. The album went platinum in 6 weeks. But the real transformation was bigger than Betty's career. Her testimony before Congress led to the Amplify Act, federal legislation requiring transparent crediting for all cultural contributions, fair compensation for consultants, and penalties for exploitation. The Recording Academy reformed its rules, establishing a cultural appropriation review board. 40 artists were retroactively credited on past albums. Settlements totaling $200 million went to exploited creators. Victor Chase filed bankruptcy after $120 million in settlements. His attempted comeback tour sold 8% of tickets and was canceled after 2 shows. He was last seen teaching pop vocals at a small private school in Connecticut, stripped of all awards and industry access. Marcus graduated Howard summa cum laude and enrolled at Georgetown Law, specializing in entertainment law and civil rights. His first case as a clerk, representing a young Latina singer exploited by her label. 18 months after that night at the Staples Center, Betty performed at the BET Awards, backed by a choir of 50 black service workers, janitors, housekeepers, cafeteria workers, security guards, all with extraordinary voices. She wore a custom blue jumpsuit deliberately echoing her janitor uniform, but elevated, dignified. Mid-performance, she brought Simone on stage and handed her a microphone. This woman taught me that our voices are not just gifts, they're weapons against erasure. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Beyoncé, Rihanna, and Viola Davis stood with tears streaming. Betty's closing words rang through the arena. To every black person who's ever been told you're too much or not enough, too loud or too quiet, too urban or not authentic, you are not the problem. The system is. And we're not asking for permission anymore. We're taking what's ours. 2 years later, Betty headlined the Staples Center, not as a janitor but as a star. 20,000 people, majority black and brown faces who'd never seen themselves represented in this space. She brought James on stage, the coworker who'd seen her gift when everyone else saw only a mop. James, crying, said, "I told you that you had a gift from God, baby, but I was wrong. You are the gift." Betty performed her new song, "We Were Always Here." As she sang, the screens showed archival footage of uncredited black musicians, studio singers, background vocalists from the 1950s to now. Names scrolled, hundreds of black artists finally acknowledged. The performance ended with Betty standing in silence, fist raised, as the crowd chanted, "We see you, we see you." Betty Williams hadn't just reclaimed her voice. She'd amplified a movement. The Invisible Voices Foundation had awarded 2,000 scholarships. The Amplify Act had returned $500 million to exploited artists. Betty had proved that one moment of courage, one refusal to accept invisibility, could dismantle systems that had stood for centuries. She was no longer the woman who cleaned floors. She was the woman who'd shown the world that the people they'd been taught to ignore often possessed the very gifts the powerful had built empires stealing. And she would never be invisible again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please do well to like, share, comment, and most especially subscribe. And turn on your notification for my next upload.